Hello, listeners. We are back once again for our last episode. You are listening to Project Kalig.Kasan, a three-episode student initiative podcast dedicated to Philippine nature and wildlife. Each week, an expert from the respective field will discuss and give insights on biodiversity and environmental protection. I am Kayla Tiangco, and with me is James Parco. We will be your hosts for today's episode.
Before we begin, let's have a short recap of what you and Zaria have discussed in the previous episode.
Yep, in the previous episode on the impact of NGOs, we had Miss Nella Lomotan with us. If I am not mistaken, she mentioned how Philippine Parks and Biodiversity works with the LGUs and other NGOs, and especially the grassroots community in monitoring the species found in the protected areas. Despite being a relatively new NGO, they have already accomplished so much. I really hope that their future plans for the work conditions of the rangers will really happen.
I agree. You and Zaria really had a fruitful discussion in the previous episode. So, if you haven't listened to it yet, don't miss your chance. Our first and second episode can be found in this podcast and on our YouTube channel, Project Kaligkasan. Let's now move on to today's topic on the role of the Academe on biodiversity and environmental protection. Project Kaligkasan is in partnership with UP Association of Biology Majors and is brought to you by the Ateneo Environmental Science Society.
I'm so excited, sana excited din kayo. It's now time to get some deeper insights from our special guest, the director of the UP Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology, Dr. Lemuel V. Aragones.
Dr. Lemuel Aragones is currently the director and a professor of the UP Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology. He is also the head of the Marine Mammal Research and Stranding Laboratory, a lab dedicated to studying the marine mammals in the Philippines and to examining the various aspects of biology, ecology, conservation, and management of this understudied and undervalued group of animals. He obtained his PhD in Tropical Environmental Studies in Marine Ecology at the James Cook University in Australia. He is the president of both the Philippine Marine Mammals Stranding Network Incorporated and the Philippine Environmental Science Association Incorporated. His research interests revolve around marine ecology or biology and integrated coastal resources management, conservation biology, coral reef ecology, among others.
Okay, so let's start. First of all, good morning po, Dr. Lem. And it's nice to have you here today with us, even though, we have to make ends meet so that we can meet each other. It's very busy semester. So I would like to start first with our interview by, sharing with our listeners on what are the goals of the IESM as an institution of UPD. Because I don't think everybody knows what this does since it's a very specific field po.
Okay, maraming salamat, Kayla. Ang Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology is a very unique institute and a component in academic unit of the College of Science, Kolehiyo ng Agham sa Universidad ng Pilipinas sa Diliman. Ang aming pinakamisyon ay magparami ng kaalaman tungkol sa environmental science at meteorology, magparami ng magdagdag ng mga katauhan na mga scientista, researchers sa field ng environmental science and meteorology, hindi lang sa Pilipinas kundi sa Asia-Pacific region. Kung mamarapati nyo, ang Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology ay nag-iisang unit sa buong UP system na nag-o-offer ng graduate degree sa meteorology, master's at PhD. Dadalawa lang po sa unit ng buong UP ang nagbibigay naman ng PhD at Master sa Environmental Science. Ang isa po ay sa Los Baños at ito nga po kami sa UP Diliman, ang Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology. For simplicity po, noong 2003, Board of Regents merged the then program of Environmental Science program for that matter, at saka Department of Meteorology and Oceanography na naging Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology.
So, dahil you mentioned po na you want the field of environmental science na malaman ng public po natin, why in the Philippine context po, why must the environment be protected?
Napakalawak ng konteksto ng environment. Sa Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology, yung ginagamit po namin ay ang tinatawag na sphere approach. Biosphere, yan yung living component. Yung abiotics, are the non-living components, ay naandyan yung ating atmosphere, yung ating hangin, yung ating panahon, weather, climate, at yung ating hydrosphere, yung ating tubig, kailugan, lawa, dagat, ang ulan, at ang ating geosphere na nagdulot ng distribution ng continents natin, kung nasaan man ang mga earthquakes at dulot ng mga proseso nito ay ang ating distribution ngayon, current distribution ng ating planeta ng continental context. So yan po yung context ng environment. Napakalawak nga po, no? So isa pong siguro para maliwanagan ng ating mga kasama ay ang kagandahan po ng environmental science ay meron po siyang konteksto ng physical sciences, physics, kasama po mathematics, kasama po ang chemistry, no? Meron po siyang context ng social sciences, may konteksto po siya ng natural sciences. Tatlo po siya, no? Ang mga natural sciences tulad ng economics, ng sociology, at sa natural sciences naman, of course, meron dyan biology, biochemistry, and the like. So yan po ay napakalawak na field. Pero ano po ba talaga ang pinakapakay ng environmental science ay ma-achieve po ang tinatawag nating sustainability, no? Na hindi natin nasisira, at kung hindi niyo pa po na nire-realize, napakalaki na po ng pagbabago ng ating mundo dulot ng nating mga tao, Homo sapiens sapiens, ang naging primary agent of changes in the last 250,000 years, particularly in the last 10,000 years. Wherein agriculture industries have come to play to have made changes. So yun po yung sinusolve ng environmental science, these imminent environmental problems.
So very large pala po yung scope ng environmental science kasi usually po yung iniisip ng mga tao pag environment, yung sa labas lang or yung mga trees lang, ganon. So, why po, if let's say we're talking about the wildlife and nature and the biodiversity, why must we protect this? Kasi parang ang layo nila, nasa forest sila, tapos tayo nasa urban areas or nasa community. Why must we think about those po?
Napakagandang katanungan. Sa palagay ko rin ay siguro majority ng katauhan sa buong mundo, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, have this such ignorance or poor recognition of the importance of life and biodiversity. Una sa lahat, ang planeta natin, even in the context of the simply how we have seen so our solar system, our galaxy, and our universe, we know for a fact that in our solar system, tayo lang ang may life. And therefore, Earth's main feature is life. Yan po ang ating natural capital. Nagko-continue ng allow life to proceed. And the most unique property of life is diversity. And that's biodiversity. The more diverse our systems are, the more complex they are more resilient. They are more able to resist change and disturbances. Unfortunately, hindi ganoon ang understanding natin. Napakasimple na. Ay, layo naman natin sa mga batong makikialam dyan sa biodiversity na yan. Ano bang makakain ba? Masusolve ang pagkagutom ko niyan? And that is where these issues arise. And unfortunately, we seem to have too simple phenomenon right now, the disconnect, wherein a lot of people, younger generation, kayo, siguro kayo na yung Z or lampas pa kayo sa millennials, dapat ngayon marami na kayong nasa daliri nyo working on the keyboards or on the laptops and iPads and cell phones. And sometimes these recent generations have this connection of saan ba galing yung kinakain nila, sinusuot nila, ginagamit nila, gasolina, lahat, etc., kuryente nila. Then there's also this context, simple context of shifting baseline. Ang shifting baseline ay pag nakapunta na kayo, nakalabas na kayo, sabihin, oh, ganda pala ng dagat na to, ganda pala ng bundok na to. Pero hindi nyo alam, the real scientist says, there's so much depreciation already. And therefore, hindi natin masolve yung problema kasi pagtingin natin, akala natin maganda na eh. And so we have been missing a lot of this. And that is the real story.
So if we want to address this problem, because we don't want to be so detached pala from our environment, what are the major activities that the IESM do so that to reach to the public?
Actually, yung context namin sa using the sphere approach, so kami yung sa biodiversity, kami yung biosphere group, so meron kami scientists ng mga atmosphere, yan yung meteorologists, meron kaming geosphere, yan yung sa earth science, meron kaming sa hydrosphere, meron kaming hydrology, sa oceanographer. So yung biosphere, yan yung interest ng inyong grupo. Ako ay working on biosphere. Primary and specialization ko ay marine mammals. Marine science ang master's ko before pursuing PhD in environmental science. Meron akong kasama sa IESM na sa biosphere working on mangroves and seagrass, si Dr. Rolyon. May kasama ko si Dr. 𝗥𝗢𝗙𝗏 naman working on invertebrates diversity and the like. So these are some of the extent of our works that we are doing in biodiversity. Of course, I've been working beyond marine. I also have worked on montane and tropical rainforest. I just published last year an assessment of the National Greening Program. I was part of that paper. But most, if you have seen my publication, will be more on large marine vertebrates, dolphins, whales, dugongs, and the like.
So, yung contribution po of the institution is more on research?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Because kami ay graduate, degree granting unit lang, and research. As opposed to, yan, IC, may undergraduate, may graduate. Dadalwa lang kami sa buong kolehiyo ng Agham, Marine Science at IESM ay nakapokus lang sa graduate at research. The rest of the institutes, tulad ng Institute of Biology, Institute of Chemistry, Physics, Math, lahat yan, may undergrad, so medyo busy sila doon sa katulad niyo na pag-develop ng future workers on that field. Kami ay maasa sa mga ibang universidad na will have to recruit from that, which is also difficult, but ang context lang ay makafocus naman kami sa pag-research, pag-develop ng talagang scientist na, kasi ang scientist ay dapat nagre-research, kung tuturo man siya, ay nakakapag-publish siya, at yan ang tinatawag nating ratio na pinag-uusapan natin sa scientist. By virtue of the Department of Science and Technology, ang definition ng scientist talaga ay may PhD. So yun yung problema natin, ang unti ng may PhD sa buong Pilipinas by ratio of the society proportion, isa tayo sa kulelat sa buong rehiyon natin. So kailangan natin magparami. So nire-recruit ko kayo, James, yan, kayo po ay sana mag-pursue ng environmental chemistry, bias ako So of course, there are so many fields of interest. Ang kailangan lang maging of course ang science, ang chemistry kasi may PRC kayo Kung minsan pwede nang kayong doon na lang sa level na 'yon. Kami naman ang interest namin is talaga mag-PhD para talagang magkakaroon kayo ng independent research, makakapag kayo ng inquire of questions, develop studies to answer those questions, and that is what the research is all about.
So in your research po, are there like first-hand experiences where you contributed sa, let's say po, mga endangered species, or like nag-field study kayo? Are there any experiences that you can share with us po?
Ay oo, siyempre ang mga marine mammals, nakalista yan as sa Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, Department of Agriculture, 𝗷𝗍𝗎𝗆, ang may jurisdiction sa base sa batas natin sa dolphins and whales. Ang dugong, nag-iisang herbivore, sa Iranian siya, is under the DNR. So, yung mga efforts, early efforts pa namin ng colleagues ko in the 90s and now my graduate students this past decade or so have resulted to recommendations of talagang naging critically endangered itong dugong natin, even though under the IUC, and if you check dugong is just a vulnerable species kasi ang dami niyan sa Australia. Kaya nga ako sa Australia ng PhD ng dugong eh. Ang dami pa sa Red Sea kasi mayaman naman ang mga bansa doon eh, hindi pinapatayan at hindi kinakain. Sa atin, kinakatay at pinapatayan. So it is through those studies that we have done, they have been, apart from the other studies, we've been part of the sources of information that eventually the mandated agency, in this case, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Biodiversity Management Bureau, declared in 2014, if I'm not wrong, is the critically endangered na ang dugong. In the context of the dolphins and whales, of which I have also lots of work, we have recently been highlighting the importance of the 𝗔𝗏𝗏𝗏 dolphin, which is a very, again, critically endangered cetacean. Kung sa dolphins naman, ang pinaka-critically endangered ay ang 𝗔𝗏𝗏𝗏 dolphins. Nakikita lang siya sa Palawan at sa Region 6, particularly in Negros Occidental, Guimaras, and southern section of Panay. So, very restrictive na yung kanilang distribution, and if we do not protect them, maybe in my lifetime, they will disappear. Maybe dugongs is another 50 years or so. Maybe in your lifetime, they will disappear if we do not do anything really significant about this. Of course, I have been fortunate to still be working on dolphins and whales, of which some of the data that we are seeing right now are showcasing the diversity of where these assemblages are found, and therefore we are able to inform management agencies that are mandated to protect this species where the protection should be. And most of my data comes from my work on, half of my life is on marine mammal stranding, yung animals naman, dolphins and whales. Humihinga kasi yan eh. And the easiest way for them if they're very sick and very stressed is to seek a shallow portion para makahinga sila ng maayos. So hindi sila isda, no? Kailangan nilang huminga ng hangin. And by virtue of that, that is what a stranding is all about. So I was fortunate to have formed in 2005 when I was doing a postdoc in the States, coming back here to establish that. So I decided in 2006, the following year, to come back to the Philippines. Even though I had a very nice position and job in the United States, I opted to work on a very, very critical and endangered species, group of species that are now seeing some attention, at least from the different mandated agencies.
So we really appreciate po for your dedication to come back here and serve the country. And as the country's national university, you have stated as a way on how you have already contributed to environmental protection. So how else can UP help in being a leader in environmental protection?
I think UP has the opportunity to truly engage as a system. It's not just even UP Diliman, it's a system to truly engage in an interdisciplinary approach of examining problems, answering questions. And for example, I've worked with a lot of ecotoxicologists. I've been working with a lot of ecotoxicologists looking at levels of polychlorinated biphenyls and even pharmaceuticals byproducts right now, endocrine disruptors, in the context of long-lived species such as dolphins and whales and its impact on their biology, on particularly reproduction, which is a very important critical process to perpetuate the species. And we have to have that. I've been working now lately with physicists to study the impacts of dynamite blast, which is an imminent problem of illegal fishing practice that is still being practiced. When I was a very young high school student at UP Rural High School, my professor in social science said, there is this problem of dynamite blasting, and he brought us to a place in Pangasinan. And right now, that place is still booming with so much problem. Professor na ako, and we still haven't solved that problem. So now I'm trying to look at the impacts of the physics of the sound, of the bioacoustics. So we have a paper coming out soon. And so I think there has to be a conduit, I think, to make people talk to each other. And unfortunately, IESM is a small player. It's a small institute in the College of Science, which is 11 faculty, 44 yata ay sa IC, 23, 25 yata sa MSI. Kami isa sa pinakamaliit. And it's a very young. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary. 56 ni yata o 60 ni yata ang MSI. Ilang taon na yung because form ng 1908, nandiyan ang chemistry, nandiyan na yung math. So, and environmental science just boomed in the 70s in the developed countries. And so we were sort of 50 years behind. So hindi pa natin talaga na assimilate what environmental science is. Truly, that's the real problem. And even in the systems, they haven't really seen the light of the importance of focusing on an interdisciplinary approach to highlight the potential of solving environmental problems.
So I think we really should make science serve the people. Am I right?
Yeah, true,
Yes.
true. Science is unfortunately a very minuscule proportion of right now of graduates. It may be good, high in UP Diliman, but in the context of the entire nation, there are few students who come to STEM right now on the K-12 programs. I was just fortunate to have very excellent teachers in my modular kasi kami sa UP, elementary. So I was challenged. I was the context of discovery. We have to put that back in the teaching. The primary is key to pushing people to think scientifically. And fortunately, in the K-12, that was set back at the very later portion. And produkto na kayata kayo ng K-12, and you know what I'm talking about. We've reviewed the K-12. And as a scientist, I'm very sad that there's not much focus on science. In fact, I must say this, there is no culture of science in the Philippines. We are full of so many culture. One is culture of superstitions, which is the exact opposite of why a culture of science won't thrive, because of, even scientists, knock on wood, and still, they're still practicing that. And so it is a very, very difficult task to be, for me as a scientist, to come back and challenge the society, the leadership. It's just fortunate the time at UP. I cannot imagine doing this at Ateneo or any sectoral universities, which in there is just so much this position of hierarchy and UP is the best in terms of that openness and challenging even leaders to higher position to think beyond what their disciplines are. And I think you are in a great position as students to, and I hope you take advantage of that.
So there's so much room pa for improvement. And, as the IESM is still kind of new. I really hope that in the future years mas mabibigyan po siya ng funds, ng the opportunity to be able to serve the people better.
Yeah.
So we have just scratched the surface pa lang with our topic on the academe and on environmental protection. So I think I will pass the mic over to my co-host now, to James, to discuss with you na po with our second part of the interview.
This month, the University of the Philippines Association of Biology Majors, or UPABM, will be launching its donation drive entitled 𝗥𝗢𝗺𝗺 to provide school supplies to scholars from 𝗥𝗢𝗺 Junior High School. To support our cause, we invite you to join our raffle draw for only 20 pesos per entry and get a chance to be one of 28 winners of vouchers from Clean Canteen. Simply go to tinyurl.com/𝗥𝗢𝗺𝗺 and upload your proof of donation there.
Who says we can't be environmental leaders in the new normal? Together, let's brave new waters with the Ateneo Environmental Science Society, the premier environmental student organization of the Ateneo de Manila University. We are all about protecting the environment, rain or shine. So, what are you waiting for? Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Ateneo ESS, and together, let's be a #Force for Nature.
Project Kaligkasan is in partnership with UP Association of Biology Majors and is brought to you by the Ateneo Environmental Science Society.
So, hello, sir, and hello, listeners. We have just learned earlier that the main goal of IESM is to educate the public on environmental science and meteorology. It also utilizes the sphere approach in addressing environmental issues, wherein Dr. Lem is focused on the biosphere, and he researches on marine and mammals, and he shared how he has contributed in environmental protection. Moving on, I will just ask Sir, how important are advancements in science in protecting endangered species?
Um, the advancements of science is key to protecting species because in the past, wala pa yung technology, for example, of drone, wherein we could do more observations without being obtrusive to organisms, to animals per particular. In the past, we were not able to look at a larger scale of changes. Now, remote sensing through looking at observation from space, and those are the advancement in science and technology that we have to take advantage of. Fortunately, the Philippine government has now created the Philippine Space Agency, of which IESM is a very key partner working towards integrating the use of satellite for ground observations, and we are doing the validation and the like. So napakaraming ways to take advantage of the the key to protecting environment, remaining habitats, ecosystems. I have to emphasize this, James. There's so much that science can do. All this advancement comes to naught if we have poor decision makers. At sino yan? Politicians. At the end of the day, there's so much that science can do. But at the end of the day, who will make the decisions, key decisions to put up things there, keep this impact, are politicians. And politicians may or may not accept science. And we've seen that for the rest of the world and even in the Philippines.
I agree po, sir. Katulad nga nung sa Dolomite sa Manila Bay, ano po yung ano nyo dun? Parang insight po as an environmental science.
We have already put out a position paper as an institute,
Yes.
as a college, as a university. We are part of that because IESM is environmental science. The Dolomite is a sad story, you know.
Yes,
Even coming from the environmental agency, the DNR themselves recommending that without proper consultations with the real experts that are that matter. And I think that's part of, I'm brave enough to say this, that this is part of what we are experiencing in the last, say, 5, 6 years already, of the culture of incompetence and a culture of indifference in the government.
Yes po, I agree po. Next po, how does the institute reach out to different LGUs in making science available for the people?
The LGUs is key to success. The Department of Interior Local Government, DILG, is a department in itself. But again, when you put into the context of the politics, the LGU is part of the politics. The LGU can be a provincial level and can be a city or town level. And unfortunately, there's so much information already out there. But it's not being consumed properly for eventual basis for policies, for decisions. Ano pa ba ang hinahanap nila? Evidence-based na ito, ang dami-dami na. We have shown that the forests have disappeared already. We have shown that wetlands have been abused. We have shown that rivers are now polluted. And still we continue the indifference to be apathetic about all this. And so at the end of it, ang sinisisi ko talaga yung mga mandated agencies and government units such as LGUs that are responsible for such. And always in the guise of food security, poverty alleviation, yung kanilang justifications sa kanilang mga unfortunate decisions.
Yes po, I agree.
So ang matadagdag ko lang, so ang kailangan natin, be wise in the next election. And a lot of people have told us that already when I was a student. Ang dami na ng mga activists na sinabi, be wise. Hanggang ngayon, wala pa rin. Why? Because we are outnumbered. So education is key. We have to properly put in place and institutionalize a real education program that starts from the primary, secondary, and tertiary. Fortunate kayo, nakapasok kayo sa UP. Parang butas ng karayo na, napakahirap pumasok dyan eh. But we have now the problem of making such level of excellence, on honor and excellence, be embraced by the rest of the HEIs, the higher education institutions, the secondary institutions, the primary education institutions, or else, paulit-ulit na itong vicious cycle na to na ating makukuha. And that's the reality of it.
Yes po. Does the pandemic have any effects on the institute in achieving its goals?
The pandemic obviously has significantly hampered our effort to be able to do the field work. Ang aming kasi, ang nature ng work namin sa environmental science and meteorology, dalawa. No? Meron kaming pwedeng desktop context, which is looking at remote sense data, satellite images, archive data on the temperature, sea surface temperature, ambient temperature, rainfall, etc., humidity that meteorologists can play around and create forecasts and come up with models. Ganun din yung modeling context namin sa yung mga modeling pwedeng magtuloy, but they also need ground-truthed data, and so yung wala nun.
Yes.
No? Wala rin yung field-based na ako. Field-based ako talaga. Dapat nasa dagat ako. Nagbibilang ngayon ng mga dolphin, nagbi-picture for photo ID, etc., etc. But I cannot even be out there. I have gone out to a stranding. Once, only ako pinayagan kasi mass stranding yun. Maramihan yun sa Bicol early this year. But on other incidents of paisa-isang stranding, hindi ako payagan. No? Even though I'm the president of the Philippine Marine Mammal Stranding, because of the precautionary principle that we have to embrace as a unit, as a CU, Philippine Demand has embraced the precautionary principle. And that's why we are doing this. And obviously, science, field-based science in general, including environmental science, has been hampered by this pandemic.
So more on na lang po kayo, researches and studies na hindi sa field, parang sa
yung mga may ginagawa kami ngayong mga remote sensing, mga karamihan.
As the Center of Excellence in Environmental Sciences, how can environmental protection be improved in the context of policies and laws of the government?
Ang IESM has been the Center of Excellence since 2015, and we have been the regional training center of the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, World Meteorological Organization of the United Nations since 1978 under the Department of Meteorology and Oceanography then. So matagal nang merong stature ang IESM actually, but the thing is that, again, there's so much that science can do, and we have been consulted several times. We are working with, in fact, closely with BMB and EMB, Environmental Management Bureau of the DNR. I work closely with the BFAR, the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, for obvious reasons of the dolphins and whales. But there's so much that we can only affect, but we are not stopping. We are still persisting and doing our best. Kasi nga, at the end of the day, sa kanila yung final decision eh. And they may disregard the advancements of the sciences or the data that you are presenting, or they may embrace it. So it depends on who is sitting and the rapport that you have established with him or her, and also the person's cognizance or cognitive skills to understand the forecasts, the predictions, the models, the data that you're presenting, to make sure that this becomes the evidence base that they are looking for their policies, to guide their policies, and obviously even there to guide their decisions as well as planning in the first place.
Okay po. Paano naman po ma-improve ang environmental protection in the context of everyday activities by the citizens?
Ayan, maraming NGO nakikisakay sa ganyan. I guess, obviously, mahirap yan. Honestly, mahirap yan sa isang bansang mahirap tulad ng Pilipinas. I know that there's this issue of plastic. I know there's this issue of smoke belchers. Pero kailangan nating isipin paano yung naghihirap, yun lang ang kanilang recourse. So I'm also PUP, parliamentary ng master, so marunong ako by puso, maski na trabaho, lumaki ako sa ibang bansa. And I still am for the people. So you don't just close down an industry just because sumakay ka sa Western culture na no more to plastic, no more to coal-fired power. Hindi naman natin kaya. And there has to be this realization. Masyado tayong nakikibandwagon. Hindi naman tayo, kuryente natin, pangalawa sa pinakamahal sa buong Asia. Pangalawa tayo sa Japan. Hindi naman tayo kasing yaman ng Japan. Pero ito, demand tayong demand. No more coal-fired power plant. Mag-ano na tayo ng renewables. So, saan natin ilalagay yan? Kubera natin yung mga fish ponds, kubera natin yung karagatan natin, lalagyan natin na para patay ang mga ibon natin. Sa pag-iisipan natin dapat lahat yung mga bagay-bagay na yan. And that is where the science comes to play. But unfortunately, that's not how it's been working. We've been in the popularist side, not even not backed by science. And that's the problem.
Okay po. How important is the role of the public in ensuring the protection of endangered species and the environment?
Ang role of the public is key. Kasi nga, doon sa popularist side, kailangan nating i-push na yung popularist side, kailangan based on evidence, based on science. But the lack of culture of science hampers that in the first place. And so we have a lot of things to do. To be able to protect the environment, we have to improve the education in the mass base. Actually, pangalawa yun. Ang una, we have to alleviate the living condition, the quality of life of the poorest of the poor. Kasi sila po ang source ng problema. Sila yung main polluter, sila yung mga magdanakaw. Kung sila ay ma-address natin, ma-lessen natin yung problema natin din, as well as naninira sa environment. Pangalawa nga ay yung edukasyon. Pangatlo ay improve natin ang ating social systems. Social system nito, ano ito? Kailangan natin yung ating executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch to be more engaged, to be more empowered and independent of each other, there has to be the maturity of these institutions na hindi lang nagbabangayan to and truly be independent as a check and balance. And that has never happened in my lifetime. And that's a problem. And that also has huge ramifications on how individuals see the environment, how, ang nagugutom na tao, anong perception niya sa environment pagay mo, no? Hindi, mababaw. Ang lahat ng mayayamang bansa nag-i-invest sa restoration, reclamation, sa rehabilitation, kasi mayaman na sila. Wala pa tayo doon. And if you have heard of the environmental Kuznets curve, you have to look at that. That's just a model, a mathematical model used by economists to predict na hanggang mahirap ang bansa, ang recourse ay ang environment ang nagdurusa. So kaya nga ang sinasabi ko, address muna natin ang kahirapan, iangat natin talaga ang ating mga mahirap. Pangalawa ay educate natin ang mga kababayan natin para yung mga mahirap, hindi lang pasirkot-sirkot na mahihirap lang sila. Bigyan mo ng degree para makalabas doon sa cycle na yun. Pangatlo ay pagandahin natin ang electoral context natin on the context because they are key to the executive, legislative, and judicial empowerment.
Yun, grabe po talaga pala ang role ng public sa pag-ensure ng protection and endangered species, pero need talaga na i-address mo na yung mga problema nila para makatulong talaga sila sa protection ng endangered species and environment.
Emphasize ko lang na hindi ko yan agad naintindihan. When I was at your age, I was very passionate growing up a little bit time in Africa, seeing so many large elephants, going back to the Philippines, wala na, and then diving, snorkeling, ang ganda ng coral. So I was very passionate of the conservation, protection, and just eventually work on dolphins and whales, protection na. Pero nung nakita ko yung importance na kailangan may tao component to the equation, of the left and right of the side of the equations, then I saw that hindi natin masusolve ang problema natin sa conservation, protection of the environment unless we truly address the more basal problems of the environment, which is number one, population. And yun yung talagang overarching problem natin. And therefore, nung nakita ko yun, then I saw the importance of why I'm giving you a very different light and emphasizing the interconnectivity of things.
Yes po.
Not just saying, papatay ng mga dolphins na diba? Hindi lang ganun. Hindi pwede, hindi will work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Kung nasa Amerika ako, ganun ang dialogue ko, pero nasa Pilipinas ako eh.
So yun po. Thank you very much, sir. I will pass now the microphone to our host, Miss 𝗟𝗲𝗺.
So I would like to share rin po that I have the same stance with you about the systemic change. I think we really need systemic change for environmental protection to be effective. Kasi parang naalala ko dito, when I was younger rin po, I used to wonder why people wouldn't buy yung malaking refill sachets. Parang mas makasave and somehow better for the environment because less plastic. And poverty has forced people to buy yung mga tingi-tingi po, di ba? Yung mga maliit na sachet ng shampoo, ng conditioner. And yun nga rin po yung nagko-contribute sa ating pollution ngayon.
Nadagdagan ko pa yun, Kyle, kasi yung context nyo yan, hanggang dyan pa lang eh. Pero nakita ko yun na nung bata ko, nagdadala kami ng Tupperware para sa sukal or pero nung mga dinadaya na nung mga nagtatao sa tindahan, hindi na yung may-ari. Kasi marami nang ginagawa si may-ari. Dinadaya na, doon nagsimula yung duda. And that's a cultural thing. That's tayo rin na nagkasalanan nun. If we were honest to ourselves, which we claim to be very religious, etc., pero mandaraya ka, yun, nagkaroon na tuloy yung context na yung mga products kailangan may weight yan ng maayos, naka-sachet yan ng maayos, and that's the depreciation of our culture and tradition also brought about that problem, as well as, of course, our poverty.
So, there was also, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but with what you've discussed po kanina about you and the IESM doing so much work, I was able to relate the picture po na every disaster movie starts with ignoring a scientist, and hopefully po talaga we won't reach to that point.
It's a very unfortunate vicious cycle that we undergo. And again, it's a function of the education, it's a function of the population, it's a function of the maturity of the social political systems.
So I've learned a lot, honestly, from today's discussion on the academe and on environmental protection. At first, I think our scope was just about ISM and about biodiversity, but we really dig deep into the topic and we're able to connect many things together, like how education works and how the academe is contributing and how it's all interrelated, really. So, thank you so much ulit po, Dr. Aragones, for being with us today in Project Kaligkasan and sharing your knowledge with us. I would like to proceed na po with the presentation of the Certificate of Appreciation, which will be read by our Head of Finance of our group, James Angelo Parco po.
So, Certificate of Appreciation. This certificate is proudly presented to Dr. Lemuel Aragones for sharing his time and knowledge as a guest speaker in Project Kaligkasan, a nature talk of the Philippines podcast, given this 21st day of April 2021 and signed by Pauline Lantok, Group Representative, and 𝗟𝗏𝗪𝗏 NSTP CWTS Advisor. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much rin po.
Ayun na.
You're all welcome. Thank you very much.
This month, the University of the Philippines Association of Biology Majors, or UPABM, will be launching its donation drive entitled 𝗥𝗢𝗪𝗪𝗏 to provide school supplies to scholars from 𝗟𝗏𝗪𝗏 Junior High School. To support our cause, we invite you to join our raffle draw for only 20 pesos per entry and get a chance to be one of 28 winners of vouchers from Clean Canteen. Simply go to tinyurl.com/𝗥𝗢𝗪𝗪𝗏 and upload your proof of donation there.
Project Kaligkasan is in partnership with UP Association of Biology Majors and is brought to you by the Ateneo Environmental Science Society. Thank you for joining us this week on Project Kalig.Kasan, a nature talk of the Philippines. We hope that you picked up valuable lessons from our discussion with Dr. Lemuel Aragones. And we thank you again for staying with us in this journey of discovering the importance of Philippine biodiversity and environmental protection through different lenses.
That's right. In episode 1, we were able to hear from Forester 𝗖𝗢𝗪𝗏 on how they manage the Carino protected landscape. Despite the problems they face from illegal activities in the area and the conflict on land use, they are still hopeful for a future where they can benefit from the NGP, ENGP, and ecotourism.
In episode 2, Ms. Nela Lamotan was able to enlighten us on the impact of NGOs or non-governmental organizations through the numerous contributions of Philippine parks and biodiversity. A new but promising NGO that has already helped throughout many protected areas. Last but not the least, this episode tackled the role of the Academe on Philippine biodiversity and environmental protection.
That's not all. Make sure to visit our Facebook page, Project Kaligkasan, as we will be releasing more information and infographics on our advocacy. While you're at it, you may also check out our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Anchor. Hit that like and follow button.
Once again, I am 𝗟𝗏𝗪𝗪𝗏,
And I am James Parco.
and remember, show its worth, save the earth.